Canadian Arctic. At first glance, a frozen tundra, locked in the grips of ice and snow. But look closer and you'll find a few brave souls able to weather the storms and eke out an existence in this frozen world. King among them all, the polar bear. The largest land-based predator on Earth. They thrive where other creatures struggle merely to survive. In a world of frozen darkness, they are the ultimate predator. And anything they find has the potential to become prey. So what did I do when the King of the North turned his eyes towards me?
Close that gap.
That's close enough.
Come inside, shoulder to shoulder.
I started shooting.
Yeah, I started shooting a load of photos because polar bears are awesome. Sorry for the clickbaity title. That's on me. I own it. I apologize. I'm sorry. Let me tell you the story. So first of all, this resulted in me getting what I consider to be my single favorite photo I've ever taken. It was a photo that's been on my bucket list since the day I bought a camera. You know the shot. It's the polar bear, head down, eyes locked on you, walking forward. It's kind of a classic for wildlife photographers with any mammals, get that straight on shot. The thing is, with a polar bear, that only happens in one scenario, when you're lunch and he's hungry. This all came to be up in northern Manitoba, the town of Churchill. It's the polar bear capital of the world, right? It has the highest density of polar bears of anywhere on planet Earth. The problem is, most of the tour operators up there take you out in these massive, crazy tundra buggy things, they call them. They're like a monster truck crossed with a school bus. And while they're really cool and they get you to traverse the tundra nice and safely, you're 15 feet up in this elevated platform. The bears are off in the distance. Even though they're wild bears, it kind of feels like being at the zoo. There is one tour operator up there that lets you walk around on the ground, out onto the ice, face to face with these polar bears. They take you out with these polar wilderness guides. They are some of the most advanced, highly trained wilderness guides on planet Earth. These dudes are rugged. Think of like James Bond, but like better. Like if James Bond and SEAL Team 6 found a way to have a baby and like Rambo was in there and kind of the Hulk, you guys get the idea. They're pretty dope. Well, we were hunkered down during one of the craziest storms I've ever seen for a couple days, waiting for it to break. Woke up one morning and finally saw the sun. We get our binoculars out, we're looking around. Boop, boop, boop. Off in the distance, see this tiny little off-white speck. So we head straight out to try and more or less intersect with him. We're not trying to interfere with this bear's life. We're just trying to put ourselves in a position where he'll walk by, we can take some shots. And you're like, hey, how's it going? See you later. Nice to meet you. So the thing about polar bears is that they live in this super remote, desolate wilderness. It's a land of ice and more ice. And in the summer, they kind of just sleep on the rocks. So when they see a person, there's two ways it can go. They're either fascinated or more often than not, probably 80% of the time, they see you and they're like, what in tarnation? That's what we expect most of the time. Right off the bat, this bear's a little bit different. He crests the hill, looks right at us, and starts approaching. Well, you know, we were vaguely in the direction he was heading anyway, so nothing weird about that. When he gets a little closer, he starts walking in an arc around us. There's one reason to do that. It's to get downwind. That's hunting behavior. So now we're aware that this is a slightly different encounter than what we've had in the past. This bear is not necessarily scared of us. He's more interested in like how many of us can he eat before he's full and he needs to take a nap. That's not a great position to be when you're talking about a 1,500-pound carnivore with literally nothing above him on the food chain. There's a little bit of a checklist, a to-do list, if you will, for a polar bear encounter in the wild. So the first move when you see a bear out in the wilderness is to try and get their attention, break up their scenery. They live in a flat, silent world. It's white on white. The only sounds are the wind whistling and the waves crashing. And in the winter, there's not even crashing waves. So you say, hey bear. What's up, dude? Hey bear. What's up, dude? You know, standard bear stuff like you always do. This sounds kind of weird, but realistically, the bears have never heard a human voice before, most likely. So you're just trying to change his universe a little bit. More often than not, they're not looking for a fight. I think the guide said it was something like 90 to 95% of encounters end with a little bit of a vocal expression. We might as well have been talking to a wall. He barely even noticed it. So we move on to step 2. Clapping, banging rocks. Sounds they've never heard. This is a very foreign experience for the bear. It breaks them out of their hunting trance, right? They're locked in on what they think is food. This just kind of snaps them out of it. So we did that. It kind of startled him a little bit, but if anything, it made him more curious. So now we're moving on to step 3. This is a rare place to be. Step 3 is to throw those rocks at the bear. Now, unless you are literally Randy Johnson, you're never going to hurt a bear with a rock. Polar bears have multiple inches of fur, 4 to 6 inches of blubber, and enough muscle to literally rip a dumpster in half. Nothing touches polar bears. They have never experienced this. So when something randomly touches them, it is very weird for them, and that will definitely break them up. Except for this guy. We threw the rock, it glanced right past him, he turned around and sniffed it, and then turned back at us and started advancing again. This is what I might describe as less than ideal. At this point, he did something very unique that I've never seen. He laid down and closed his eyes. And at first glance, we were like, oh, the real baby. But if you'll notice, from his posture, his hind legs are still perfectly positioned under him. This is a hunting behavior too. Remember, polar bears live on the ocean ice. They wait for seals to pop up for a breath, and then that's where they catch their food. So laying super still, but at a ready position, is one of their most effective hunting tactics. That's what this bear was doing. He was trying to be silent so we wouldn't notice he was there, and then when we let our guard down, lunchtime. After about 5 or so minutes of that, he realized that we weren't falling for his trick, probably because you're a 1,500-pound bear, and he decided to try a new tactic. And he rolled over onto his back, which, first of all, the cutest thing I've ever seen in my freaking life. This apparently is basically the exact same kind of stress that you and I get before we steal cookies from mom. He rolls over, he grabs his head, and he's like, oh, I want to eat it so bad. Oh, I'm so hungry. So he did his little roll, basically trying to decide if this fight was worth the effort. Remember, they have to balance their caloric decisions. If they get into a fight, they have to earn more calories from that decision than they expend trying to acquire that food. So everything's very calculated. There are no rash decisions in the Arctic because life is hard. He does his little stress out thing, he thinks about it, and then he starts walking towards us again. This means that he weighed the pros and cons, and the pros of eating us outweigh the cons of not fighting us, which, fair enough. I'm not going to put up much of a fight against pretty much anything, let alone a polar bear, so yeah, I guess good call, bro. From here, we're at pretty much the last option we have for polar bear deterrence, and that is guns. The guides carry these really cool little pistols that shoot more or less flares. They kind of fizzle out and then they bang a little bit. It's like a really fancy bottle rocket. So the guides pull these out. They fire one off. He's vaguely interested in it. They fire a second one. This one gets his attention. He finally turns and leaves, slowly. Sauntering, looking back over his shoulders like, ugh, fine. I guess I'll go. Which is ridiculous. I've never seen a bear this cavalier about a human encounter. And so that's it. He finally sauntered away, and we were left with a memory card full of just some of the most spectacular photos I've ever taken in my life. If you'd like to see some of these shots, I'm going to put a link down below in the description for this video so you can check them out. I'm pretty proud of them. I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you all so much for listening. It's been really fun having you here. Click that subscribe button below. Tell your friends. Plenty of weird wildlife stories and backcountry adventures coming up in the future. I'm Nateinthewild. Thanks for listening.